I'm Dr. Rudi Newman, a historian and author working with Hertfordshire's Library Service, and in this series we'll be revealing some of the important, obscure and sometimes unusual stories to be found in Hertfordshire's history. Cassiobury Park is one of Watford's best-loved amenities, 190 acres of Grade 2 listed nature reserve with historical, ecological and scientific interest. Originally part of a much larger private estate, it was, however, almost destroyed in the march for technological progress. Belonging to the Earls of Essex, the Capel family, since 1627, Cassiobury House was originally a Tudor building, in the 17th century being extensively remodelled. The estate surrounding it comprised a private 693-acre park divided by the river, with lodge buildings and extensive landscaping. In the 1790s, the Grand Junction Canal, now known as the Grand Union Canal, was constructed across the estate. For its time comparable with today's motorways, being a major transport artery, the 4th Earl was on the company's board, and ensured that in spite of its functional purpose, it was widened and landscaped throughout the estate to better suit its picturesque surroundings. But a new technology would threaten not only the canal, but the estate itself. Steam railways were well established by the 1830s, most famously the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. Prior to the Victorian railway manias, though, passenger railways were few in number. The construction of a 112-mile London and Birmingham Railway, opened in 1838, was a watershed, the first cross-country mainline railway, today part of the West Coast Main Line. Designed by Robert Stephenson of Stephenson's rocket fame, it intended to promote trade and travel between the two cities, but was not without opposition, as the railway surveyors found when they visited Watford in 1834. Quote, "The farmers, naturally indignant, ordered these intruders from their fields. The engineers, for such they were, took but little notice. The farmers proceeded to threats. The ringleader of the invaders produced a red book, folded in an oblong form, from the voluminous pocket of his velveteen jacket, and offered it to the irate farmer as a sedative, informing him that it was the Act of Parliament by authority of which he was acting. One thing alone remained for the farmers to do: they would shoot the intruders. But the latter calmly replied that that was no business of theirs, and the farmers did not draw trigger." People were frightened of the effects that the railways could have on land values, farming, and on the scenery of the countryside itself. In a time before compulsory purchase, the London and Birmingham Railway had to privately purchase every piece of land needed. Where landowners refused, they would have to either pay large amounts of compensation or divert the route of the railway. George Capel Coningsby, the 5th Earl of Essex, was decidedly against the Iron Horse. The railway wanted the flattest route, so planned to follow the canal, passing south of Watford in a gentle curve. But Essex was having none of that. Blocking any route over the estate, the railway had to be diverted to the north. Instead of the easily built gentle curve, the new line required construction of the Watford Tunnel and several viaducts, expensive and previously unnecessary. This deviation ultimately led to the modern position of Watford Junction and its connection to the St Albans Abbey branch line, the creation of Bushey Station built in 1841, and the subsequent growth of commuter suburbs around these. None of this would have occurred if the Cassiobury estate had been built on. Such was the power of Essex and the period's landowners. The family continued to live at Cassiobury, one ironically marrying the heiress of the American Grant Locomotive Works, but after the death of the 7th Earl, the house and estate were put up for sale. Much of the land was sold for housing development around Watford Underground Station, opened in 1925, while the unsold house was demolished in 1927. In 1909, though, Watford Borough Council purchased some land for a park, extended in 1930. Another railway threatened in 1929 with a proposed extension of the Metropolitan Railway to the centre of Watford High Street. One of the two intended routes crossed the park, but ultimately neither was constructed. Railways would ultimately traverse the park, though, with the opening in 1959 of the Watford Miniature Railway. Now one of the oldest in the country, it provides great enjoyment for park visitors and continues the spectacle of steam. While not done for these intentions, in protecting his estate from the railway, the 5th Earl of Essex created the seeds of the Cassiobury Park we know today. Now recognised as one of the finest public parks in the country, Perhaps he was right after all. If you would like to know more, there is plenty available, and Hertfordshire libraries are a great place to start, with many online resources alongside material in your local library. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for listening.